Welcome back to Memory Device Technology for AI/ML Computing. I am your instructor, Dr. Shubhadeep. Let's try to recall what we were discussing the last time. If you remember, we started looking at the trends in global memory market. First, we saw what was the size of the entire semiconductor market, and we saw that a large portion, a large chunk actually belongs to the memory market as well in two primary segments. The first is your standalone market, where you have your DRAMs and your NAND flashes, and that is a very huge chunk, close to 140 to 150 billion dollars. But we also saw that an equivalent chunk is also consisted in the logic segment also, and we saw through a diagram, through a floor plan diagram, that more than 50% of the area in advanced logic devices or CPU chips is consumed by the SRAM and the associated memory controller. So with this, we started asking the question, what is driving market trends when it comes to memory devices? And we saw it is based on two key factors. The first is innovation. But the second factor is not just innovation, but how quickly you can innovate. So in the ending stages of the previous session, we saw what is driving the technology market for SRAM and for DRAM. For SRAM, we saw primarily it is all about transistor scaling, whereas in DRAM, we saw that it is primarily how small you can make your 1T, 1C, the capacitor footprint, and manage your interconnect parasitics. So today we will conclude our discussion on the memory market by first looking at NAND flash and also eNVMs. So let us begin. So we know that NAND flash consists of one transistor. It is not a normal transistor, it is a floating gate transistor. So the idea is, how did you start doing bit scaling, or how could people or companies include more and more number of bits into a small footprint? So the story here is now divided into two verticals. The first vertical involves scaling the area or the cell size. The individual cell size of the NAND flash, as you can see, has gone a radical transformation. As you see, the x-axis is in time, in years, but the y-axis is in logarithmic scale. The x-axis is in linear scale, the y-axis is logarithmic scale. So essentially, you are able to exponentially reduce the size of the area of the floating gate transistor. And this is also, if you see, is divided into two eras. The first era is that of scaling the two-dimensional or 2D floating gate transistor. So just if you have seen, or you may have seen in a regular course in VLSI technology, how you isolated two transistors was through the in earlier technology nodes, was through this process called LOCOS, which stands for local oxidation of silicon. This saw a transformation when we moved to shallow trench technology, STI. Whereas in LOCOS, you were oxidizing the silicon wafer to isolate two neighboring transistors. In STI, or shallow trench technology, you were essentially digging, but more technically, you were etching out silicon and filling it with low dielectric material. Therefore, through this process, you were able to bring transistors closer and closer together. Of course, I need not saying, parallelly, you were also being able to scale the size of the transistor as well. And through this technique, you were very easily able to reduce the effective cell area, or in other words, improve bit density. But around the 20 nanometer node, people realize that further scaling of the 2D NAND flash is no longer feasible. When we study NAND flash, we will go into exact details of why it is the case, but I can just give you a hint. Remember, NAND flash was all about storing charges into the trapping layer. Now the number of charges, as you can imagine, when you're scaling down your transistor that you can store in that small footprint will also reduce, and soon you were only dealing with few tens or hundreds of electrons in an individual cell. So as you can imagine, that will create a lot of reliability issues, and that is why people realize it is no longer feasible to scale the 2D NAND flash transistor. What did people do? What was the concept that we use in a metropolis, like a big metropolis like Hyderabad or Bombay? Soon the central part of the city, the old part of the city where there are individual homes or row houses, get filled up and crowded. So people start stacking or making houses on the sky, and that is the concept of multi-storied buildings or skyscrapers. So as you can see in this image, and we will see in further detail when we study NAND flash, people started building NAND flashes on top of each other, scaling upwards. And this gave you a lot of unprecedented ability to scale the NAND flash further. So just like the contacted gate pitch was the technology metric for the SRAM, and for DRAM was the half metal pitch. Similarly, for NAND flash, it is the gate to gate pitch. What is the meaning of gate to gate pitch? What is the distance between two neighboring cells in a NAND flash? And as you know, two neighboring cells, the gate is connected to the word line. So you can also say what is the effective word, the distance between two word lines. And now we have been able to scale the NAND flash to almost 15 to 16 nanometers of gate to gate pitch. So the gate to gate pitch for current day NAND flash is roughly 15 to 16 nanometers. But this is only half of the story. The second part of the story, while you were trying to make the row houses into multi-storied buildings, the other level of scaling that you were doing in the NAND flash is trying to accommodate more number of bits, number of logical bits into the same charge trapping transistor. And this is the story which has also enabled more areal density. As you can see, the metric of areal density here in log scale is GB per millimeter square, and the y-axis is the year. So ISSC is a very famous circuits conference where all the top companies working on NAND flash come and show or showcase their results. And as you can see, as time has progressed, by including more logical bits into the same charge trap transistor, you were now able to increase the areal density. A good way of trying to understand this is now not only you are having multi-storied buildings, but within a single story, you are making multiple flats. So multiple families and multiple people can stay in the same story. Okay, so this is a good way to kind of visualize what is happening. So in principle, the two dimensions of flash scaling has involved size, scaling the area or the size of the individual cell, and this was possible through advances in nanofabrication technology and also bit scaling. That means putting more logical bits into the small footprint, and this was enabled, as we will see, through improved device reliability and more complicated system design. Why? Because now your peripheral circuitry just does not need to recognize zeros and ones, but multiple levels. We will discuss that about that more in the future. But now, why did I kind of get into all these details? Why I wanted to explain how quickly technology is moving is to essentially convey to you that this memory market is a very high volume and low product life cycle segment. Let me try to explain what that means. Just look at what is happening in the DRAM technology nodes as a function of year. Just within 4 to 5 years, you see that the 1x node, which was constituting of more than of close to 50%, or if you take the 1x node and the 2Z node, it was, as you can see, almost 90% of all DRAM chips that were fabricated. They were fabricated on this two technology nodes. Now, if you see, just in the space of 5 years, technology has evolved so quickly that it constitutes just the opposite, less than 10%. It constitutes of less than 10%. What does this mean? That you cannot stop innovating. Second example comes from NAND flash. In 2019, a 64 level NAND flash, so a 64 level story building that you were building from for NAND flash was constituting for more than half of the market share. Now, if you see, you are not even able to see the piece of the pie in a 64 level NAND flash, and almost more than 90% has been captured by 176 layer NAND flash. That means that within a short period of 4 to 5 years, companies were able to triple the size of your multi-storied building. What does this mean? This essentially means that if you stop innovating in this kind of market, which is very high volume, because the volume of products which are sold is quite high, but it's a low product life cycle. What is the meaning of low product life cycle? That the time that a company gets from designing to bringing out to market is not very high. Not only that, it is also a low shelf life business. You cannot make NAND flashes of a particular type and store it, because soon it will become obsolete. Your competitors will go ahead of you, right? So you cannot even stock memory chips or memory devices for a very long time. And this is what makes memory market or memory business very competitive. It's a high risk business, and as they say in the US, you snooze, you lose. Means you are not up and running, you will lose market share. And that has been the story of a lot of companies. Let us not take names over here, but let's look at how in 2023 the DRAM market maximum market share was between 3 companies. 95% of the market share was between 3 big companies, and 2 of the bigger ones are from South Korea. So South Korea is also a very tiny company housing both Samsung and SK Hynix, and they are doing a fantastic job at churning out DRAM chips. And the reason is that the DRAM chip is a very mature technology, right? If you in a mature technology, what happens is there is a lot of consolidation of market, and that is what you are seeing over here also. The next thing, when we see in NAND flash, the story is similar but not same. NAND flash still has some spread of several companies like Samsung, Toshiba, now WD and SanDisk. Earlier they were separate companies. As I said, that in high risk, high competition business, there is a lot of market consolidation. Now, if you see, WD and SanDisk have merged, and now I'm hearing news that some other large semiconductor manufacturing giant has already confirmed that they will buy in WD and SanDisk, or similar news. But here, if you see, there is a little larger spread in the development of NAND flash. And can you just take a moment to think why that is the case? So the key reason why there is some spread in NAND flash technology is because your flash cell or your NAND flash or your non-volatile memories are not only used for very high performance computing, they are also used for simple devices like your refrigerator or your washing machine. There also you need flash. So you need not, every company to compete in the market does not need to go to the best technology node. For low-end consumer products, there is opportunity for you to also stay in the market. That's why you see that the pie chart shows a larger spread. Okay, so with this information, it should be very clear what is happening in the chart which I have presented in front of you. So in the chart, you see the x-axis is time in number of years, and the y-axis is total revenue change year on year. So every year, how is your revenue changing? And the funny thing, if you see over here, is on the y-axis, the number is not always positive. The number is also negative in some years. If you see, especially 2019, it was minus 25% or minus 30%. More than minus 30% was your changeover business. And that is what I was trying to explain in the previous slide, that it's a very competitive and a high risk business. Sometimes you can make a lot of money, but like you see in 2017, but also you can lose a lot of money. And the reason for that is that this memory market is essentially very volatile and it is cyclical. So volatile means there are a lot of changes. So those guys who look at the stock market, they will understand what is the meaning of volatile, that there is sudden changes in the price. There is price movement is very high. And also it is cyclical. What is the meaning of cyclical? It moves in cycles. As you can see, roughly you see that the up and down movements have a rough time period of roughly 2 to 3 years, And why is this the case? For two main reasons. That first, products which were built just a year back or 2 years back become obsolete very quickly. And secondly, it is all about demand and supply. So especially in the years of COVID, where demand came down, you cannot still keep manufacturing running these fabs. So people, all the manufacturing companies, they also ramped down their production. However, when the demand started rising after the lockdown was kind of declared closed, or the economies opened up, we were not the semiconductor manufacturing companies had some lag period to supply the chips in the market, and this movement between demand and supply is what results in these large fluctuations in price, just as you see in India with onion prices or tomato prices, because they are perishable items. You cannot hoard them, you cannot store them. Okay, the example that I gave was very interesting because when I was buying my first car in 2022, we saw a very huge periods of wait times for even simple cars. And the reason was, it was not that the car manufacturers were not ready with the cars. The thing was the semiconductor, especially memory manufacturers were not ready with the memories. And as you know, a lot of your cars are now completely electronically driven. So there are many semiconductor chips that are used in modern day cars. Okay, so with this, let's also look at what is the segment-wise split in the growth of memory market. So in 2019, it was roughly, as you know, this is only for standalone because you cannot see the SRAM. So 2019, it was $111 billion and it is growing at a CAGR rate of 9% to projected to be $185 billion in 2025. Remember what CAGR or CAGR was? You just need to divide this number 9 with 72. It gives you a rough number of 8. That simply means that the memory market is doubling every 8 years. Okay, and it is not very surprising to see that the biggest chunk, we also discussed that, belongs to DRAM. Although DRAM capacity is low, but cost per bit is very high. So majority of the share comes from DRAM, more than 50%, and that is growing at a rate of 7%. Whereas NAND flash, which has the next biggest share, is growing with 11%. But something that I want to now point your attention to is the growth in the section of electronic non-volatile memories, ENVMs, which grew from $0.5 billion to $4 billion at a rate of 42%. So ENVMs, which we are saying is going to be the future, there is a lot of investment and thinking going on for the growth of electronic non-volatile memories or storage class memories, which is expected to bridge the gap between NAND flash and DRAM, right? So you can see that what the future is. So this is coming because of a lot of innovation, and you have to appreciate that 42% of CAGR means that the segment is growing once every 1.7 years. It's a doubling every 1.7 years. Now that is quite tremendous. So let us look at the last part of our discussion today. Let's look at the ENVM market and the phenomenal growth in the ENVM market. And that is because there is still no clear winner of who will take the roost in ENVMs. As you know, there are several candidates for these two terminal electronic non-volatile memories. The first is random access memory, your MRAM, which is spin transfer torque, and also phase change memory. And as you can see, within that also there are two segments. One is your standalone, which comes in a separate chip, and another is embedded with your CPU subsystem as well. In the standalone segment, as you can see, the green indicates phase change memory. So the majority of the share is being taken by phase change memory technology, which is around $6.1 billion in 2023. The primary reason for this phase change memory is a lot of phase change memories are now quite an established technology. Material scientists have been looking at phase change memories for a very long time now. And even your old optical discs had phase change memory. So that is why phase change memory was very promising initially, and there was a lot of investment by Intel and Micron through Xpoint. But now we see that it is kind of loosening up a little bit. In embedded systems, as you can see, the primary dominant lion's share is taken. Earlier it was through resistive random access memories. Now it is through spin transfer torque memories. That is because of few companies like Everspin and Intel are very closely looking at STT-MRAMs, although the market is very, very small, for embedded storage technology. And the reason for doing this is the fact that spin transfer torque or any MRAM kind of technology, which we will see in the future, in future lectures, is very, very low power consuming. Okay, so the interesting thing about all these three kinds of candidate technologies, whether it's PCM, it's RRAM or STT-MRAM, is a lot of old traditional companies like Intel, IBM, Fujitsu, ST Microelectronics, Micron, all of them are looking very closely at them because they are supposed to be the future, and you don't want to miss the bus on these kind of technologies. But also very interesting is a lot of startups that are vying for this space, and it is very interesting to know the story of two such startups. First is Crossbar, which is looking primarily at RRAM technology. So Crossbar, the founders were actually faculty members in University of Michigan, and there was a technology transfer from University of Michigan. And similarly, Everspin, which is a very good company in spin transfer STT-MRAMs, they were started in the University of Arizona, and now they are a full-fledged company. So a lot of role in academia and academic research is important in the area of understanding electronic non-volatile memories. And this segment, as we saw, is expected to grow and is expected to explode simply because they have the promise for being classified as storage class memories. Those memories which can bridge the gap between memory kind of applications and also storage, because they can give you very small read and write latencies while giving you very high bit densities. Okay, so here we will conclude today's discussion, and in the next discussion we will enter a very important and a rather serious topic, that is of memory array architecture and design. So just to conclude what we studied today, we looked at what are the two verticals which is driving innovation in NAND flash technology, and also we saw why eNVMs through a lot of activity is vying for a lot of space in the memory market. Thank you very much.